Now let us start with the idea of climate change. Okay, so now we'll only talk about academics and we'll discuss climate change from the start. Now, in climate change, firstly we have to understand what is climate change. So if I look at climate change, what is it? This is a fairly basic thing which I think you are aware about, that it is long-term shifts in the temperature and weather patterns of the world. So they are long-term shifts in the temperature patterns and the weather patterns of the world, right? It has various impacts. So it is mainly caused by humans. So it is anthropogenic in nature. And it includes the phenomena of global warming, but it has various other impacts. One of the major impacts is intensification of weather of all types. So summers will get hotter, winters will get colder, rains will get more intense. This is the idea of climate change, and these are basics, right? Now what we have to understand firstly is the impact of climate change. And this is also something that has been asked in previous year questions, so this is important. If I have to look at the impact of climate change, how do I study it? I can study it ecosystem wise. So I can think about various ecosystems on which climate change has an impact, or I can study it community wise. So there are various vulnerable communities where climate change is going to have an impact. So now these two things are there, right, where we are going to deal with climate change impact. Okay, so if we look at it, there are various regions where climate change can have an impact. So as far as heat is concerned, 2023 was actually the warmest year ever on the planet. So here it can have impacts on heat waves, on marine heat waves, on rising global temperatures, which is global warming. So this impact is something that we all know about, right? Then in terms of weather impacts, especially as far as adverse weather events are concerned. So if you look at cyclones, cyclones will get more intense and the pattern of cyclones will also change. So for example, earlier cyclones rarely occurred in the Arabian Sea, but now they are going to get very common in the Arabian Sea because of the impact of climate change. Then if we look at marine ecosystems, obviously there is the idea of marine heat waves. There is the idea of coral bleaching. Then there is the idea of the AMOC, which is a climate tipping point. So the impact it has on the Atlantic meridional overturning circulation is also something we have to mention, right? Then there is on the marine and linked to cryosphere, there is an impact of sea level rise. And this sea level rise leads to coastal flooding. Then there is an impact on forests. So it can cause forest fires. And it has an impact on cryosphere where it will lead to melting. It can cause zombie fires also. Zombie fires are fires that happen in the tundra region, which was supposed to be permafrost. It was supposed to be frosted throughout the year, snow throughout the year. That's why it's called permafrost. But because of climate change, it can lead to zombie fires. Now, there is a keyword here that I want you to keep in mind called Arctic amplification. Arctic amplification means that the impact of climate change is going to be much more on the Arctic as compared to the other parts of the planet, right? So here there are going to be impacts throughout this region. So if we look at it, the places where the sinks are. So if we have to examine the phenomena of climate change, there are two things. There are the sources and there are the sinks. sinks are the area where greenhouse gases get absorbed. Sources are emitters of greenhouse gases. The problem of climate change is that its impact, as far as we see it on nature, has a vicious cycle. So climate change itself increases the sources of greenhouse gases, which causes further climate change. For example, when climate change will happen, it will lead to wildfires, it will lead to zombie fires, it will lead to cryosphere melting. So further sources of greenhouse gases will emerge and further climate change will be caused. Then the other problem of climate change is it takes away the sinks. So the tundra region of the world was earlier a sink where greenhouse gases got absorbed from the atmosphere. But because of climate change, it has itself become a source. Now, this means that climate change has a cyclical nature. So, if there is a cyclical nature, right, of climate change, it means that there are certain points. If we cross those points, or if we cross those limits, climate change then cannot be stopped. These points are known as tipping points, and this is also something that I'm sure you have read for prelims. There are 9 tipping points, right? These 9 tipping points, if crossed, will lead to climate change becoming a problem that humanity cannot solve.